have you attending. This is the second of our three-part series of webinars on both candidates and our Conrad Woodall. We'll be having another series coming in after the new year, and we are open to any ideas that you all have or topics you want to talk about. Superintendent of schools is a critical position. We all know how important education is, and the United States ranks somewhere around 25th in the global democratic countries in the world. And Idaho ranks in the lower echelon in the United States. This is in terms of academic performance of K through 12. Obviously, this is unacceptable to everybody. So this position is critical to us, and it's certainly one that can make a difference. We already noticed the lack of inductive thinking and reference to history and politics in our culture, in our politics, in our community discourse, and an education that doesn't provide these things will only exacerbate the situation. So we came out early as Pushback Idaho in endorsing Debbie Critchfield. We truly believe she's the most equipped to get things done. She has an excellent skill in both tactical and strategic thinking about education. She understands the rural environment as well as the urban environment. And she has a real concern for measuring the quality of education and making sure our money is going there. So we were out there with her in the beginning. I am very anxious to talk to her now with all of you and hearing her positions. A lot of things have been going on since we last talked, and I'd like to hear her positions. I'd like you to listen, and as she is talking, you will have personal concerns yourself. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a Q&A at the bottom. You just click on the Q&A, click in your question, and my partner in change, Pam, who is on this right now, Pam Johnson, she will ask your questions of Debbie, and Debbie is anxious to hear you have some challenging questions. She doesn't back down from anything. So let's, at this particular point, get going. And Debbie, welcome to this webinar. We're delighted to have you. We know you're very busy, and we're glad you made time for us.
Thank you. Thank you for putting it together. And as you said, Mia, you and Pam, you're some of the original folks that I talked to soon after I kicked off this campaign over a year and a half ago. And so it feels really satisfying now to kind of come full circle as we're the election.
Yeah, well, we're delighted. Let's get going, because we've got a half an hour of time with you, and then we're going to get a half hour of questions and answers. Okay, I'm ready. She's ready. Okay. This is a tough job, especially with education being under the microscope, both nationally and here in Idaho. So what made you decide to run for this position of superintendent of schools, Debbie?
There are several, and I want to make sure we can really highlight those kind of important pieces of what we want to talk about. And so I want to focus on one particular thing. And to get to that thing, I want to say that I had been sitting as a State Board of Education member for 7 years and 2 years as president. And those were the most recent 2 years. And then we had COVID, and that happened while I was president. And during that time, nearly every federal requirement and rule was waived. All of the state requirements were waived for education. And I know why we did that. And we needed to do that so that our districts could make decisions to be able to navigate. I mean, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we were making decisions in real time, hour by hour, it felt like at times. And at the conclusion of really that intensive 2021 school year, it felt like as a state, we just kind of all, as far as educational leadership, that we all held our breath. And then it was like, okay, let's go back to normal. And I couldn't live with that. I thought, we've missed all these opportunities. For years, we've talked in education how, well, if we didn't have to follow these rules, and if we didn't have this requirement, and if the state or the federal government got out of our business, we'd be able to create and imagine the things that we need to have. We had that opportunity, and one thing changed, and it's a kind of important thing related to funding. But everything else, we just went back to business as usual. And I think we're feeling the impact of that now, where we feel unsettled, we don't feel satisfied. And getting into a position for me personally, away from an appointed position where I could really impact the kind of change and lead the kind of change I wanted to do, required me to change jobs at the same table. I think you're on mute, Mia.
Most people would like it if I would mute more often.
Now when you got to answer questions. No, I don't.
That's true. I'm interested in what in particular you think needs to change. Give me a few things for the audience that you really think need to change.
Well, let's start with seat time as an example. Somebody, and I don't know who this somebody was, about 20 plus years ago, decided that in order to say that you're getting the education that you need in elementary, junior high, and high school, it's about seat time, a required number of hours. And as an example, in high school, it's like 1,060 hours. That not at 1,059 or whatever that is, not at 1,061, but at that exact number, then you are proficient and you are ready to go on to the next step. And it's like that. I think it's 660 hours in elementary school. I don't know who came up with that. That doesn't make sense to me. And if we've learned anything, that learning happens outside of a required amount of time. And so how we create the conditions for schools to have their calendar years, to run their school days, that starts at the top with the state. Nothing changed there. I look at graduation requirements. One of the main platform pieces that I have as a candidate has been a focus on vocational training, career technical training, workforce development. We don't see that elevated to the same level as traditional academic paths. Idaho is very good, and like many other states, at getting kids to college. If you want to go to college, we know how to get you there. Let's get as good at getting kids opportunities or prepared for the opportunities that are around them. So graduation requirements, seat time, and frankly, how we really approach the delivery of education. It's a modern context. The hallways are very different places than the ones that we grew up in.
Okay, great. Thank you. A question for you that has always interested a lot of the people that are probably on this is, I said earlier that you both have tactical and strategic abilities. I'm kind of impressed with some of the things that you have said, but I'd like you to reiterate, what is it we need to do better strategically as superintendent of schools? Where would you focus that?
Well, I'm going to start with the umbrella of the term of leadership. And I would say that at best, it's been absent. And we've seen a number of resources come into education. In fact, in the last 4 to 5 years, there's been nearly $600 million more put into education. Now, I believe that we want to adequately fund our schools, but resources without a plan is just putting it out there and then crossing our fingers and hoping that our districts and our state will make the strategic decisions that need to be made to advance us to the outcomes. And so I don't see and haven't seen a strategic plan to get us to those places. What are those things? I hear them from parents. I hear them from business leaders. I hear them from students and teachers, but we don't talk about them. There's been no formalizing of, okay, what are we going to do? And then attach the money to that. I have seen the reverse of that, where let's put more money into it and then hope good decisions are made. That's not how I will operate, and don't believe that anybody who's successful, whether it's in their home or in their business or wherever, that's not how they operate either.
Okay, so having a plan is not something that's been happening?
No. and I can tell you that because I sat at that front row of education on the K-12 side. So our governor, everyone around the person who was elected to do that job was coming up with what they wanted the plan to do. And so our governor said, hey, we want literacy to be a plan. Okay, what does that look like? Well, we're going to put more money into it. And then it was left to our current Department of Education to go out and assist districts in making good local decisions to support the goal of literacy, which I think we universally believe is important. Well, what we've seen around the state is everyone had a different look and a different approach. Some people use their money to do things I don't know that were probably the top priority effective ways. And I believe that we can strike a really meaningful balance between where the state comes in on the guidance and the leadership role, and then the local decision. I'm a former 10-year local school board member, and so I respect and appreciate what local control is, and I love the design of that. Can you imagine how much stronger our local boards can be when they have effective leadership at the top?
Gotcha. So getting back to the academic part of this, in K through 12, when somebody graduates, what do you feel are the key competencies they need to graduate with? Whether we have them now or not, what should those be in your mind?
Well, we got to start with the basics. And I think that we've got to return to the basics of, again, going back to literacy and reading, making sure our students are at grade level and they don't get to the 9th grade and have somehow gone through all the cracks of the system and they can't read. That can't happen. The basics of math, including what I want to bring to the table and is currently in process, is a required graduation class for financial literacy. And I think that we as adults appreciate that the skills and understanding of an algebra class or a trigonometry class are very different than balancing a checkbook. What are taxes? How do I apply for a loan? And those types of life skills. And so I think when we look at this preparation piece, Mia, we need to then back it up and say, what are those things? Kids need to be able to read. They need to be able to understand their finances and have basic math skills. And then they need to be able to take the knowledge that they've learned and apply it to something. I'm a big fan of project-based learning, applied knowledge, how we make that relevant experience count for kids.
Good, good. Something that's pertinent to us in our area, we have a strong immigrant population. So we get a lot of kids that come into school without the language and so forth. We rely on, or it seems like we rely a lot on the schools to do something. I don't know if this is a school community thing, but how do you see the communities and schools working together to ensure that obviously immigrants can move forward, but that it doesn't pull the rest of the classes back in having to take care of language issues?
Well, I think there's a couple of issues related to this topic. I do believe in the partnerships that we want to have locally. There's a lot of people who their goals are the same as the school district's goals, that we want to create contributing citizens that are able to work and to thrive in their families and in their hometowns. I don't believe that, for the most part, our school districts know how to begin the communication of engaging other partners. They don't know where to start. Many times that they're so focused in that everything is education focused. Let's get an outward approach where we see who are those natural partners, who are people who also care about these things that we can bring in, industries that are looking to help train their workforce with better language skills. Usually the parents of those businesses at those businesses have children in the schools. So how do we do this in a family approach? And then I think another important part of how we do this, many of our students, we've seen our graduation rate decline over the last 4 years, which is shocking to me in a state like ours. I believe that part of the reason is that kids don't see that there's something for them in high school. That if I don't want to go to college, what am I doing here? What is it that interests me? And this gets back to this workforce, the skills development, how we create our graduation requirements so that we have routes to graduation that are also geared towards jobs and certification, badging, all of those things.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Let me go a different tack for a minute here. How should we, so let's get from the students to the teachers, how should we support the teacher in the classroom? What is your position on that? Obviously, teachers are frustrated. We're trying to keep them. We're trying to attract them. There's a lot of issues out there. What do you think?
Well, I'd like to spend a minute or two talking about non-financial ways. I think that we can continue on the financial side to build out the career ladder that was put in place a number of years ago, and that has significantly helped. But there's more work to be done there. It doesn't reflect inflationary times. There's a number of factors. If you're a border state, we're not as competitive with some of our other states regionally. So I think that financially, yes, so there's more work to be done there. But I also believe that there is a great number of our teachers who want job satisfaction. They want to feel that they have value and that they are valued in the classroom. I'll tell you that the number one thing that I've heard from teachers over the last year and a half, and I have traveled everywhere you could possibly think of in Idaho, at least twice. And I heard this consistently. It was not about the money. It was about having tools to deal with severe behaviors in classrooms. That is what is driving many of our teachers out of the classroom. It is more and more that we have students that are coming to class with all sorts of needs, learning needs, physical needs, emotional needs. Our teachers were not and are not prepared for that. We've got to fix that in two ways. One, I've made a commitment to teachers that when elected, that I will gather the most effective strategies for them for dealing with their students. Our students are, our teachers are fearful many times of lawsuits, and I'm not at all promoting any type of physical violence or anything like that. But to the point that many teachers are afraid to even touch a child, that maybe needs to get pulled back into line or whatever that is. They want help. And so for teachers that are in the classroom now, our state owes them strategies, protocols. This is how you deal with it. This is how you handle behaviors. And in my mind, all of that is directed to where you engage the parents so that they can get the type of help that they need for their child, if it's severe emotional or behavioral. On the pre-service end, when we're going through our colleges of education, I'm not convinced that many of the things that are being taught in our colleges are applicable to the classroom and have the modern context. I've been a longtime advocate that student teaching should not be the last year of your college experience. It should not be the culmination. I believe student teaching should take place earlier to give teachers, one, an opportunity to be in the classroom and experience what that's like, and then go back to an instructor. And when they're talking about something, they could say, yeah, well, when I was with a bunch of seventh graders, that didn't work. What would you do in that circumstance? And I also think it helps individuals who are choosing education know if that's the career for them. We want to create the strongest profession that we can, and it's going to take more work and more effort than simply saying, well, let's pay them more money and then that it fixes the problem.
Okay, thank you. Where is the bright line between the school teacher and the parent? So you have a lot of, you're talking about a lot of things that involve the parents, and having been on the school board, you've seen it from that angle as well. And we hear often parents saying, we're not getting heard, or there are things happening in schools that parents don't particularly like, and they want to be heard about them. Where is that line between that? How should that be working?
Well, I think it first of all, it needs to be open. And we need to be very transparent as school leaders and schools what's going on, and parents need to feel welcome. If I had been thinking about it, I would have been able to hold up a card that I put together, and I'd invite people to go look on my website. But I put together something called the Parents' Bill of Rights, and it's not a copy and paste of something that I got from somewhere else. It's been over 20 years worth of experience in education and having 4 children in public schools. I got this question repeatedly from parents. Well, can I ask about this? Or how do I know about that? Or what happens if I don't agree with this, that, or the other? And so I put together 10 things that I believe that the parents have a right to. And they are the ones that are primarily in charge of directing the education of their child. And so I would hand this out to parents, not to make it adversarial between parent and teacher, but so that parents knew going in when you're sitting at the table, hey, I have rights here. I have an ability to have these conversations with teachers. I talk a lot with districts about communication. Don't ask for parent feedback if you're not going to use it. I think that's one of the things that gets communities into discord a lot, because communities were asked about something from the school district, and then there was no follow-up, there was no changes, there was no nothing. Don't ask then. I mean, we want them to interact with communities, but I tell districts, if you're not really interested in the information, don't go about this show of acting like you care. Provide meaningful opportunities for parents to provide that feedback. A 2-minute unanswered comment at a public board meeting is not meaningful interaction. And we can't invite parents to meetings at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday and then wonder why no parents want to participate. Schools have got to meet parents where they are, and then parents need to start at the place that they would expect that the school is trying to do the right thing for their child. So go in with that attitude. Hey, we all have the same goal here, and then let's work through the problems. That's one of the assistance that I look forward to helping our districts or to provide for our districts, so that they can navigate this transparency, engagement, and ultimately that partnership is the ideal way to help kids.
So in our particular area, we don't even have that going. It's kind of, if you want to talk to us, you can send a comment in, and then we'll respond to you privately.
That's not community engagement. It's not. Yeah.
Okay, that's not something you would.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't support that. I mean, communication is two-way. I can fire off all kinds of disgruntled comments anywhere in the world, but what does that mean? I mean, I just put it out there. And so I fully intend to work with districts. Many are nervous, and these are volunteers that are not professionals in any, in school governance. And so they come, you have 5 people that come to a table from a variety of walks of life and different professional and non-professional training. And so many of them just don't know how to engage. And so I want to put together, I hate to say toolkit, because that makes it sound, simpler than what I want to do, but we've got to remove this fear on the school district side, that engaging in the community is difficult and hard. It's not. It just simply isn't hard.
Okay. So on that line, when we have school board positions up next year, so we'll have all these positions. What would you think? You've worked on a board, you've gone around and visited these boards. What makes an ideal board member?
What an interesting question. First of all, someone that comes in with the perspective of the entire school district. I've seen board members that were elected because they were mad about the cheer coach when their daughter got cut from the team. And that's hard. That's hard to work with someone who came in because they're angry about one particular thing, and they only care about their school. And so having a viewpoint of how does this advance the goals that we have? What's the mission statement of the district? Someone that can work with others. There's a beauty in a board when you have 5 people, and when you can have a full conversation where you're honest, and you don't live in fear that you're going to be attacked because of something you've said, or someone's going to attack you. That sets your community up for that type of conversation that you want to have. And then I think understanding what the role is. You're not the boss of the high school principal. You may not like what they're doing, but when a board member walks into that high school by themselves, they're a community member. Yes, they're on the board, but they're not speaking for the board. And many times we get board members who want to micromanage or believe that because I'm on the board, I'm now in charge of the transportation director, or I can now walk into a library and tell the librarian to do X, Y, or Z. Well, no, the librarian's boss is the principal, and the transportation director is probably, supervised by the assistant. The board has one employee, and it's the superintendent, and they are the CEO. So when you want to move, when you want to get changes done, you talk about it as a board, and then you direct your employee to then go make those changes.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So I say, when we get school choice.
Yes.
What would be the role of the superintendent of schools. Where do you see that coming together? Everyone's very anxious to have a healthy public school system, but they want choice too. Where would you see yourself fitting in that?
This is an interesting topic, in that, we talk a lot, you say when we have school choice, and I would say we have it. Idaho, any parent can choose at any time where they want their child to be educated, whether it's the living room, the classroom, charter or private, whatever. We're able to do that. What I have heard has been, what happens for a parent that wants to choose a private school, should the state then intervene and send money to be able to do that? I think that how we talk about this and how we put this together, it's not a simple answer, because for me as a Republican, and I think for anyone, I think we need to be very cautious anytime we ask the government to get involved in all of our decisions. Once we start taking money, as we know, there's an accountability piece that goes with that. And so I think we look, for me as a superintendent, that you look to make sure that if decisions go that direction, that the money is being used for accredited schools, that we ensure that parents aren't cashing out on kids. There may be and probably would be parents who would see that there's money available to be able to do that, and so I in that sense I look at all of Idaho's kids as part of the system that I oversee, and ensuring that our students are protected and that they get the education that they need to have.
Great. I've used up all this half hour to get a pretty good feel for you, for everybody. Real anxious to bring Pam in and get some questions and ready to answer those. Should we go?
Yes, thank you.
Are you on board to ask some questions of everybody?
Hi, Mia. Hi, Debbie. Great interview so far. Thanks, Mia. Debbie, we have a couple of questions.
All right.
All right. These are meaty and they are from the heart.
Okay.
So we're going to go right in. And I think there might be some, there's a backstory to some of these questions, I believe. And if you wouldn't mind assisting us and maybe filling in that backstory. But here we go. From Northern Idaho, Radar asks, why is it so hard to get certain parts of the education system to work to maybe resist change in how funding can come to private schools? So here we go. School choice is going to be big. We warned you. Over to you, Debbie.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Gosh, I'm just going to, I'm not going to give an answer that is the answer, because I think it depends on, where you are in the educational system as to why you may think change is hard. I think in general, it is hard to make change. Education is a big ship, and there is a long history that goes, back into the middle of the 1800s on how we educate kids. And because we've all been to school, we all think we're experts on how to do it. And so it can be challenging to move bureaucracy, to change attitudes and those types of things. Now, specifically related to money following kids, I think the focus about public schools and having that be the constitutional mandate. I look at how we're doing it. I fully respect a parent's decision and would protect a parent's decision to make the educational choices for their child. They're in the position to do that and should always be able to do that. I think when Idaho's constitution was put together and going through statehood, and I think about, our founding fathers, there were certain elements of our government that were believed to be so important that they weren't left individually to the people. And that what are those things that we want to collectively contribute to ensure that we reach our goals. And I think that that's how we got to this publicly educated society, that, our tax dollars will go to support that, because we believe as a people that that's, very important. And so I think a lot of that is rooted in that. And so, we look at what we're mandated to do, what we believe we should be doing. And there are a lot of viewpoints out there, and many saying, hey, it's time to talk about it in a different way.
All right, for our listeners, that's a loaded question. Bring in some questions and we'll circle back. But for right now, we have a question from Zoe. In Idaho papers, Planned Parenthood has made the papers, and it has become our sex ed of choice. That's the overall impression. What is going on?
I, like many of you, are following the papers and a lot of the media. I can tell you as I've traveled the state that it is the exception to have a school district that is looking at a Planned Parenthood curriculum. The statutory authority for choosing curriculum, whether it's sex ed or reading or math or science, falls to a local school district. Some of our school districts have decided to outsource the teaching of that to a health department, or maybe they look at a health department curriculum, and that's how they, will get that in there. When I was a member of the Cassia County School Board making those decisions, we looked at abstinence-based curriculums and looked to our health teachers with approved materials through our process. And I believe that that is the priority place and where our district should be looking, rather than looking to outside community sources to supply that information. And this gets us back to, how do we engage the community? How do we let them know what's going on? Our parents care about this. I don't believe in implied consent. There are certain topics for which me not telling you no doesn't mean I also told you yes. And so I think districts can help themselves, help kids, help their communities when they're transparent and when they look to reflect the values of their community.
Okay. All right. From Lisa. And I know from several others, if we have another pandemic situation, what is your role in decision-making regarding health policy?
Well, the law has been changed. It was for health departments, and now it's been moved to state education agencies. And I would do what I voted for a couple of years ago, and that was leave it to a local school district and a local school board to make that determination. It made no sense to me to have a uniform policy that everybody was closed or everybody was open, although my preference was for open. Let communities work it out. I saw incredible success stories around the state where schools didn't need to shut down. And in places where I guess boards thought that that was important, we saw a lot of board changes happen. And so getting to this, what is my role on health policies? It would be almost nothing as far as that, but I would, again, do what I did a couple of years ago, and I would assist schools in being open, in person, face to face.
Oh boy. We have some listeners who might have more questions for us on that particular topic. Okay. Next question is from Joe. What's the biggest difference between you and your opponent?
A number of things. I'm going to start off with experience. My opponent was in the classroom, I think 14 years, and then went to do something else, which is great in education, but has never been on a board, has never been in a leadership position, has never managed people, managed departments, managed budgets. Hasn't had the opportunity to work with school districts, the legislature, to work with the executive branch. In order to advance any of the goals that we have, you have to start from a place where people trust you and you can build relationships. And I think that is one of the key differences.
Okay. Keep these questions coming, folks. Curriculum. This is from Stuart. I applied to be on the curriculum committee for my school. I have not yet heard but I am wondering if I do not make it on, how do I, hang on here, I can't, let me scroll, people. How do I influence the decision to my benefit?
Do you have a friend that's on the committee? You know, all I could say is you have an elected school board member from your zone. Reach out and have a conversation. So if you know, and I would start it off with, hey, I applied to be on the curriculum committee. For whatever reasons, I didn't make it, but it's important for me that you hear from me and my viewpoint. I'd like to visit with you in person or send an email communicating your viewpoint and direction.
Okay. For our listeners, this is a question, since this was brought up. This is from me. Debbie, the curriculum committees require parents in each school district, or excuse me, schools require 6 parents in each school district to be on the curriculum committee. That is a broad change. It's a large change. Do you have any information for our listeners on how that's going actually in each school district?
So Pam, I'm just going to do one little tweak or correction to what you said, that the statute actually reads that half. And so there was talk early on, the first iterations of the bill were to assign a specific number, but what ultimately went through the legislature wasn't a specific number. But so if you have 4 people on your committee, half of those have to be non-school personnel or anyone that doesn't benefit from the school district. And so the reason for that, you know, in rural areas, it may be very challenging, you know, to come up with a number of parents. Anyway, I want to make that clear first. And then I haven't heard, you know, I know of a handful of school districts that are going through various levels of adoption. And I hear that they do, in some areas, they do struggle to get parents to participate. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't keep going after them and making sure that, you know, the district, it's on the district to make every effort to make it possible for parents to participate. And that goes back to this, you know, don't have a meeting at noon on a Wednesday and then say, well, geez, we just couldn't get any parents here.
Oh, okay. Sounds like real life there. Thank you for that distinction. I think a lot of folks actually interpreted the reading of the final rule to mean 6 parents, 6 others, whatever. So it sounds like it was either amended or we misinterpreted. And
and I can send the actual code. I had it memorized at one point because I got asked enough about it, but I'll go find it. But I do know that it says half.
Okay, that's very, very helpful. Okay, here we are. Bear with me, folks. All right. From Peggy. In talking about and getting and keeping teachers, you mentioned that colleges may not be providing the soon-to-be teachers that need to be prepared. What solutions do you have for alternative route educators that don't have the pedagogy? Currently, in my district, we have 8 out of 52 teachers in our secondary schools who have a traditional certification. Many of these alternative certified teachers don't know how to manage a classroom. They are walking out.
I agree, first of all, with that. And I have seen enough that I'm coming to some conclusions about some of our situations that we hear about in classrooms relative to teachers who aren't prepared and aren't trained, that have, you know, they're not going through the traditional paths. I believe that we should have open doors to welcome anyone who wants to be a teacher into education, but all of our roads need to lead to a certification. We want to have standards. I think we can increase the numbers of teachers that we have without reducing the quality or the standards that we have. That's the place that I start from. And so as we look at mentors, for teachers that are in place, if they've come from a non-traditional route, mentors become a very key part. Having said that, the mentors that we're looking at also have their own classrooms and are carrying large burdens, and it takes a lot of time for them to carry their responsibilities. Looking at education itself, I know that I don't have every answer, but I'm aware of what the issues are. I'm aware of the challenges, and I want to have the conversation, a statewide conversation that says, here's what we're dealing with. What are the most effective ways and the most efficient ways that we can solve some of these problems? And I'll look to teach for that are in the classroom.
All right, allow me. I'm looking at Peggy's question in front of me, and she states that in her district, there are 8 of 52 teachers in the secondary schools who have the traditional certification. Now, for our listeners, Debbie, perhaps you can back into this a little bit more and state what is a traditional certification, and allow me to move that forward a bit. And let's talk about what Ron DeSantis did in Florida, which is vets. You have high skills. We don't have enough teachers. With this small certification on the side, we can put you in the classroom and to benefit students all over Florida and to fill the jobs that remain unfilled. Now that's 2 questions in one, but I want to return to 8 out of 52 teachers in our secondary schools have a traditional certification. So if I may ask you to please define traditional certification.
That would be a 4-year college degree that leads to a certificate, a license to be a teacher. And so that's that traditional path. And I think across the board, we are seeing adults that are looking at non-traditional ways of going about just how they make their professional decisions. And so many get into teaching after they've been in another career, and we'll look at other ways to have that license. And Pam, that kind of leads me into the next part of your question, looking at people who have experience in the content area of something. I'll give a local example. Had a friend that worked at Monsanto, in fact, and had a really great deep knowledge of biology, and as a second career wanted to go and be a biology teacher. And so rather than go back through a 4-year traditional path to get that teaching certificate, he chose to do an online test that showed that he knew the content. And to Peggy's point, putting him in the classroom, he knew the subject, but now what he needed was support in classroom management, how to navigate the school system, how you do attendance, and, a number of these other things. And so I think that there is a place for both sides of this. We have people who day one of college, they know they want to be a teacher, and we want to support that. And then we see others in the community who, again, as a second career, or I've seen a lot of moms who getting back in, either getting back into teaching, their license or their certificate expired. They want to get back into it, but maybe don't have the resources or the time to go through another 4 years. Will seek out alternate paths.
Okay, and again, this is from me picking up on what you just said regarding Peggy's at-large question. Do you actively seek out, will you, I guess is what we should say, will you actively advertise, market these positions to communities of highly qualified individuals who could easily fill these positions?
Absolutely. And we refer to them as grow your own programs. And we see these all over the state where it may not even be someone that's outside of the school system, but many times our building administrators or teachers see paraeducators or others that are involved in the school system that, you'd be an excellent teacher. How can we help you expedite that to get you into the classroom? And then we've got to wrap around that support. But yeah, absolutely. Particularly in our rural communities where it's the most challenging to recruit, keep our experienced teachers. And for many of those small communities, and I live in one of those, that when you have this wonderfully experienced, great, 30, 40 year long teacher that retires and you don't replace them.
So I'm a big fan of Peggy's question. So allow me to also continue on this line.
Okay.
Will the State Department of Education, perhaps looking roundly at the situation of unfilled positions, teacher roles, be creative? In other words, if you have the Grow Your Own program, is it possible for currently working individuals to tailor their own schedule to possibly go into the school to conduct a class, maybe 2 hours a day?
I think yes, that's the quick answer. And I think we're seeing all sorts of versions of that. We see individuals who are in the classroom and it's counting as their student teaching. We see, well, just every version that you can think of. About, I'm going to say 4 years ago now-ish, I worked with a legislator while I was on the Board of Education and another board member to put together something called the Content Mastery Certification Program. And it's offered through the College of Southern Idaho and through Lewis Clark State College. And it takes individuals who already have a degree in something. And it says, you know your content. We're not going to now make you go do things related to learning your subject, but learning about being a teacher. And it's self-paced, it's online, it's a fantastic program. I send people that way all the time.
Wonderful. And just to close out Peggy's great question, 8 out of 52 teachers in our secondary schools have a traditional certification, but they can't manage a classroom. Does the content or does the curriculum for these soon-to-be teachers who will fill all your roles, Debbie, when you're elected, does it include classroom management?
No, it doesn't. And that's a critical problem.
Okay.
And so that's when, when we talk about how we're preparing teachers, yes, there are things that we can do better at the traditional college level, but there's a whole world of things that we need to do better in the non-traditional ways.
All right. Thanks very much. Great question, Peggy. Okay, I have another question. Well, I have a few, actually. Here we go. Next question is, it's fine in theory to leave decisions to local school districts, but it appears some local districts begin by limiting citizen parent involvement. For example, oh, here it comes, refusing to hold open in-person on the ground meetings. They will not let go of COVID era procedures. Can't openness be mandated by the legislature?
I think anything can be mandated by the legislature. I whether or not they would take it up, I don't know. What
is the scope of the problem?
Well, I'm assuming we're talking about a local district here. I'm not aware of, again, having traveled around, and I don't know every single district, every single place, but I'm just not aware of anyone that is still centered in that format. And I would certainly,
me, Debbie. Oh, yes, thank you. And I hope I'm not interrupting.
No.
I did interrupt, actually, but allow me. Locally, I believe the question was asked by Patton, that Blaine County itself has a board who does not allow open on the ground meetings. And I am very familiar myself with many notes being sent to the board, the school board of Blaine County, to request open meetings wherein everybody has their traditional Americana approach of 3 minutes at the microphone. And instead, in Blaine County, they are requesting that any questions be sent before noon on the given day of a Zoom meeting in which the board members conduct their business. So I think there is broad frustration locally on this matter. And how is it that they are, under the open meeting law, allowed to presume that they can continue in this fashion?
So the open meeting law says that a school district has to conduct their business in the open. It doesn't direct or require a board to allow the public to be a part of the meeting. Now, you can disagree with that, but that's how the open meeting law is in Idaho. So you're there to do the public business, but they don't have to allow public interaction. Having said that, I support every effort to have that openness. We don't want to prohibit, and we don't want to pit our communities against our boards. Ultimately, it comes down to the community when it's time to vote board members that you're choosing folks that, I guess, reflect where your community wants to be. And it sounds like more open. Not having attended one of your meetings, and it doesn't sound like I could anyway, in person, I don't want to comment too much on that, but I have heard this repeatedly, and I'd say keep talking with your board members, and hopefully they will see the value in having community participation.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Patton, for bringing up a community-wide concern. Next is Mary. And here you go, Deborah. What about books in the school libraries that are inappropriate for underage children? Is that something you have control over?
I don't. And I don't want to sound like someone who doesn't want to take on issues by saying local control, but it is a statutory a requirement in Idaho code or ability for districts to make those decisions. Now, something I do want to talk about in this, there is a difference in how curriculum is approved and how library books are approved. All curricular material goes through a process that ends with a school board saying yay or nay. This is what we want. This is what we're going to do, or we don't. That's not the same for library books. And I'm not throwing librarians under the school bus here, but our school board members do not approve every single book that's in the library. It's very important that a board have these conversations to say, well, okay, well, what is that process going to be? What is that going to look like? I mean, we've got a lot of, I guess, protections for kids. I mean, minors can't go to certain movies. There are other ways that society outside of a school system protects the material and the content that's presented to minors. And so I'm encouraging boards to have public and transparent conversations to say, this is how we handle books that are in the library, and how a parent can come in and offer feedback as to why they think it should or shouldn't be there, and clearly communicate that to your parents.
Okay. I'm going to play timekeeper. We have 10 minutes left, and I have a couple of more questions. Anybody listening, please type in your question, and we'll try to fit that in based on what we've heard thus far. We have another teacher who asks, in my district, teachers have left the profession because of lack of respect. How do we get back respect for our educators?
I hear and see this all the time, and it breaks my heart. Teachers come at education with a love and a passion, and they love the art of teaching. They love to learn, and that's who we want to keep, and that's who we want with our kids. One of the things that I talked about day one that I wanted to do was restore the value of education, and teachers need to see their value in that as well. From my angle and my role, I want to celebrate the successes. I mean, we hear a lot of things that are unsavory, that are concerning, that worry us about education. That's the exception. There are so many tremendous things happening in our classrooms of teachers that show up every day that care, and that care about kids and care about making sure they're successful in their learning, and that stay after school and come early, and the projects and the field trips and all of these things that really make us excited about what we're doing in our state. And I want to be the state storyteller of sorts and share those, not just within a community, but around the state. And I think as the way we talk about it and the way we come at it I believe, will have an impact positively on the respect.
This is my observation, and I would ask the listener who typed this question in. I am concerned about the lack of respect. I don't know that, to me, respect is a big word. It's a broad category. And I would ask the listener to, I'm sitting right here, I'll take your question. What is an example? What's the biggest example of the lack of respect? Because for our listeners, many of whom are not teachers, this is unacceptable. So if you have any, if you have an understanding, Debbie, of what a lack of respect is referencing, help our listeners.
I can help that out, because I hear this too, and I'll translate it how I think, and then let your questioner explain it herself. And here's the comparison that I'm going to use. I see a lot of similarities between the education profession and law enforcement. There is a feel about that. A feel of not being respected, a feel of not being paid well, a feel of having to take on roles and responsibilities that before we haven't had to have, and a fear that goes with that a little bit too, that you're in the public eye, and that there's a strict or a harsh scrutiny that comes every time something happens. Then, oh, it must be the teacher's fault. So there, like I say, I use the law enforcement comparison as a way to say, this kind of overall attitude that we have about what's going on in the classroom. And that may not be what the question asker was getting at, but that's how I take it.
Okay. All right. Again, we have 5 minutes left. I have a question from Radar. Are you considering troops to teacher programs?
I haven't. Pam, you raised that.
Right. With Ron DeSantis, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, that hadn't been on my own radar. And so I'm going to do some investigation on that and check into that. My father was in the military, and there's so much value that come from our servicemen and women.
Okay. Well, Debbie, I have no more questions popping in. We are here to get you there, as one of my marketing folks used to say. And I would love for you to share your website, and you still have about 100 hours left before everybody votes. So what is your donation situation? How can we help you?
Listen, we're accepting donations up until the end. We've traveled everywhere. We want to communicate with everyone. I feel an urgency about helping our teachers, supporting our kids, meeting the expectations of our families and of our communities and parents. Debbie for Idaho, it's the number 4.com is the website, and you can learn a little bit more about me if there was something that you're wondering about we didn't talk about tonight, and a way to donate on there. That's a show of support of the message and the direction that we want to go. And as you've said, we're nearing the end, but we're going to be working up until the very last minute.
Great. And for our listeners, if you will, go to pushbackidaho.org. You'll see us online, and ask us your questions about how to specifically donate, and we'll redirect you if that's helpful to you all. I'm going to turn this back over to Mia, and thank you all from my perspective. Over to you, Mia. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
Well, thank all of you for being on this webinar. We look forward to seeing you again, maybe on Monday, the 14th at 7 o'clock Mountain Time, when we have Conrad Woodall, who is going to be talking about the potential that sexual education has on young people. Negative, positive, whatever, he's going to talk about it. And it will be a very interesting discussion from someone who has a great background in the psychology in this area. Look forward to seeing you then and at all of these. And Debbie, thank you so much for coming with us today. Good luck Tuesday.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.